So what we know is that in general, people who sleep fewer hours in their 40s and 50s, you can predict the onset of their dementia and Alzheimer's in their 70s, right? And so that seems to say on the out, because there's and the mechanism there is that sleep gives you this deep flushing through of the toxins that build up every day.
I'd like to welcome to the show, Sara Mednick. How you doing, Sara?
Hey, nice to meet you.
A pleasure to meet you as well. Thank you so much for coming on the show. I'm excited to talk about your new book, The Power of the Downstate, and talk about sleep and talk about how we can use it and what happens to our brains and when to eat and when not to eat and when to go to sleep and when not to go to sleep and how many hours we really need. There's a lot of myth about sleep. A lot of old wives' tales about like how much sleep you need and things you hear. So I want to hear it straight from the not the horse's mouth, but from the professional's mouth. So my first question is, how did you start your journey into understanding sleep and restoring energy from sleep and all that kind of good stuff?
Do you want the long version or the short version?
The
Probably
short one would be fine.
Sure. I was when I finally got to graduate school, I just went to a lecture by a guy named Robert Stickgold, who was starting to do a new form of sleep research, where he was able to actually put together a new way of studying the benefits of sleep for cognition. And it was so interesting and exciting that I thought, and he's also such a kind of wacky guy that I thought, this is a guy I could work with. So we started talking, and he was always doing nighttime sleep. And he showed that you needed to have at least 6 to 8 hours of nighttime sleep to show any benefits from a full night of sleep. But I had many people I knew who were nappers, including my dad, who was very, very dedicated napper. And he would sleep for 20 minutes to an hour and wake up and be a new man.
Mm-hmm.
I thought, well, that doesn't make any sense, right? How can we have this daytime period in the middle of the day that makes us feel wonderful, but if we slept for just 1 hour in the middle of the night, we'd feel terrible, right? So it got me questioning this idea of naps and what was so special about naps. And that's how I built a little nap lab in the Harvard psychology department. And then from there, it just moved on to deeper understanding of the roles of sleep in a whole bunch of, not just cognition, but also health. And then what's going on when we sleep. And then that gave me this insight into the autonomic nervous system. And it's just flown from there.
So what is the downstate?
Yeah. The downstate is a term I came up with that I actually borrow from science. And it summarizes or encapsulates all of the restorative activities and processes that we need to engage in on a daily basis, both during the day and the night, to make sure that we have the most amount of resources possible, that we've replenished all of our resources, and we're ready for the next go time, which I call the upstate. Because we're rhythmic animals, we go from upstate to downstate, from upstate to downstate.
So and I guess this goes back to when we were hunter and gatherers. I mean, we needed to restore our bodies, our minds, things to be able to go back out and hunt. You can't hunt 24 hours, 48 hours straight. You have to have a restful period. And this seems to be something within nature. There's a cycle in nature, even if it's the seasons, there seems to always be a restorative state. And a downstate. So fall and winter would be a downstate, and an upstate would be spring and summer. Is that a fair statement?
I mean, you're singing my song. Yes, that's exactly right. Is if you start to see the world in rhythms, you realize that everything is rhythmic. Any living animal has these rhythms of activity and repose. And the repose isn't just a period where you're just, dead. You basically are doing all of the replenishing work, repairing, because, the upstate's very stressful, right? This is where all of our stress occurs. This is where we do our exercise. So we tear our muscles at that point, right? But we also make all these like new thoughts in our heads. We experience a lot of stressful experiences, and all of that creates a lot of wear and tear in our brains and our bodies. On our heart systems and our our metabolism, our guts, all of these places feel that stress. And so we need to go through periods where we can replenish that, but then also process it, process the emotions and process the stress, so that then when we get to the next day or the next moment, we've calmed ourselves down enough and restored ourselves enough so that we're ready for that next day.
So why is it then that certain people can function on a 5 to 6 hour cycle comfortably during the day, and others need 8 hours, 7 to 8 hours a day? And it doesn't seem like a lot of time, but boy, that extra hour does add up. Trust me. I know. I mean, sometimes my body won't even let me sleep past 7 hours. It just wakes up automatically because that's my rhythm. I'm an early riser. I go to bed around 10 because I'm an old man now, about 10. And then I wake up around 5 every morning to go to the gym or to meditate or to work or something along those lines. So that's generally, so I get around between 6, 7, like 5, a solid 6 hours. Sometimes I can encroach into 7 hours and I function. And sometimes I've gone months going 5 hours sleep and I function fine. But other people need 8 hours. And I don't even know. I'm just telling you my experience of sleep. I'm sure everybody who talks to you talks like, well, I only need 2 hours of sleep. What is the science behind what we actually need? And is it a case by case basis?
Yeah, everybody's sleep is different, as you said, right? So there are some genetic differences between people. And there are different groups of people. Some people are what we call short sleepers. And it sounds like you might be one of them, where 5 hours, even sometimes people say 4 hours, can be enough for them to do really well. And they're usually morning people. 10 p.m. is the perfect time to go to sleep, because the first part of sleep is the most restorative part. And I can get into that if you'd like.
Yes.
And so so that's great. And then you're an early morning person. So you wake up, with the roosters, and you're up and you're active and you're probably full of energy for the day. And maybe you have to take some breaks during the day, but you're pretty high functioning. As you said, then there's a whole bunch of other people who are kind of within that 7 to 8 hour period. But then there's other people who really need 9 to 10 hours of sleep at night, and they really don't function well without that level. And it seems crazy, right? Because that would be double what you need. And why would we be made the same if we actually need what's the importance of sleep if one person can be fine on 5 hours and another person needs 10 hours? Well, as you said, it's all individual differences. Your sleep might be more efficient, so that you're getting into that deep restorative sleep and you're staying there and you're really getting a lot out of it. And then you're getting out and you got it, right? Other people who sleep longer may need more time because their body hasn't been as efficient in terms of restoring itself. So that's a question of like looking into the EEG and seeing what the difference is between or the ECG too, what's happening in the brain and the body in terms of those differences.
So you said that the first part of sleep is the most restorative. Can you go into that a little bit?
Yeah. So sleep is, there's about 5 different stages of sleep, but really we focus on the difference between slow wave sleep and REM sleep, rapid eye movement sleep. And then there's stage 2 sleep, which is sort of the intermediate period between these. And slow wave sleep, if you think about the calendar of the day, if you think about not the calendar, but the time of the day, the second you wake up, you're at your most well rested. And basically then you start to have this ticker that's counting out the minutes you've been awake. And that ticker tells you how much slow wave sleep you need. It's called sleep pressure. And since the moment you wake up, you're building up your sleep pressure to get back to sleep. Because of that wear and tear of being awake, you need a restorative period of sleep. And that occurs during slow wave sleep. So when you first go to sleep, the majority of your sleep is spent in slow wave sleep. And you get this really deep restorative period, kind of like a mini hibernation state. And once you've satisfied your need for slow wave sleep, then you go into rapid eye movement sleep. And that's more early in the morning. And rapid eye movement sleep is really a very different brain state from slow wave sleep. It's very active. You see a lot of improvement in creativity, a lot of improvement in sensory memory, like your perception can get better, your auditory processing can get better. And so you have these two bookends of the first part of sleep and the second part of sleep.
So during that rapid eye movement time period, is that where a lot of the dreaming happens? And
yeah, exactly. That's when the really, I mean, you sort of have dreams throughout the night, but the really crazy fanciful dreams occur during REM.
And is that the ones that stick with you? Because dreams come and go, but the ones that actually stick with you a little bit past when you wake up. Because I dream almost every night. The more emotional ones goes into long-term memory, as opposed to just in that really, dreams have a really special place because they're short-term memories, but they're like on very slippery slope. It just goes really quickly. I have to kind of remind myself or write it down really quickly to remember it. But sometimes the emotional ones really, really stick. In regards to your research, what part does dreams have in the restorative process, if any?
We don't really know. I mean, everything that you're saying about dreams really locks into the science, where the part of the brain that really helps you with the long-term memories is the frontal part of the brain, and also the hippocampus. And the more emotional and the more motivational parts of the brain is the amygdala and other areas. And what you find when your brain is in that dream sleep is that frontal area is shut down, and you're really in this highly emotional, motivational state, but without a lot of ability to lay down these experiences as memories. So that's why when you're in that dream state, you're experiencing these highly charged crazy kind of connections between different stories in your life. But when you wake up, you can't really remember them because that memory state is turned off. But if you wake up and you immediately start recording it, repeating it to yourself, then that frontal lobe is already turned on, and you can start to rehearse what your dreams were. But as far as really understanding why we dream, or what that has to do with restoration, it's hard to know. At this point, we understand that dreams may have something to do with laying down long-term memories because they're ways of kind of hypothesis testing. Recent experiences can be integrated with your entire semantic knowledge, your kind of knowledge tree. Your new experiences get inserted and played with, and sort of, how does this relate to my dead grandmother, or the way I played basketball when I was 12. And so, you're integrating all these things in a creative way. But really it's a wide open field in terms of trying to understand dreams, and throughout history, from very early on, every culture has tried to understand it, and we still don't really have a good handle on it.
It sometimes with that kind of stuff, you have to start leaning into the spiritual texts of the ancient texts, and they have some conversations about it. It's really interesting because I've talked to many spiritual masters and gurus and many scientists, neuroscientists on the show, and I've talked to both, and I find that science and spirituality is starting to connect more than they ever have before, where a lot of the things that were talked about in the ancient texts, like meditation, is being really backed up now by science. Like science is catching up to something that's been talked about for 3,000 years. So that's why it's pretty fascinating. So I think dreams is definitely, it's a very deep ocean that we're still trying to figure out without question.
I mean, to your point, one of the ways, so my research is one of the ones that really showed that the autonomic nervous system is key to many of the benefits that you see for sleep. And of course, during sleep, you can really have this big shift between the sympathetic fight or flight and the parasympathetic rest and digest. I call it the rev and the restore system, right? That you actually, when you're awake, you're revved up and you're really, excited, and you've got all the resources ready to, run away from a lion or go attack a lion. And then you've got, that takes a lot of wear and tear. So then you got to switch over to your restore system, which you have naturally during sleep. But you can access that restore system throughout the day, which is a lot of the point of what I'm talking about in the power of the downstate. And a lot of that has to do with breath. One of the best controllers of that switch between your stressed revved up state and your restorative state is controlling your breathing. And truly, I'm constantly amazed by how little modern science understands about breath, and its connection to consciousness and its connection to well-being. And really what we learn from it is from meditation and yoga and Tai Chi and the restorative practices.
It's interesting because when you said breath, the first person that popped in my head is Wim Hof, which I'm not sure if you've heard of Wim Hof and what he's been doing with the power of breath. I'll tell you, I tried it. I take cold showers. And it's pretty remarkable, the power of breath. And then again, talking to some spiritual, some Tibetan monks and stuff in regards to breath meditations that they use. They mentioned it. It was so beautiful the way he presented it to me. He's like, what, you can live without food. You can live for a while. You can live without water for even a little bit. You can't live more than a few minutes without breath. So breath is life. So when you take deep breaths, you're bringing in more life into you. And it was like, it's obviously so basic and simple, but yet it is a restorative practice. And if you start looking into the yogic practices of breath and breath control, I know you mentioned panicky breath. When you like that kind of breath, your systems are starting to, you're in fight or flight. The slow, deep breath slows everything down. Is that correct?
Yeah. I mean, one of the real big influencers for me as well was James Nestor's book, Breath. And that came out when I was writing my book, and I actually got him to read my book, and he wrote the blurb on the front cover because, such a key component of creating that balance between your stressed out state and your restorative state is through the breath, and is harnessing that. So I think it's I'll say it again, like it's amazing how it's very hard to find science around this, except from India and Tibet and places where they've been studying this stuff for years, and the stories that come out of those cultures, scientifically validated, are that there's a level of physical control of our bodies that we have no idea how this happened. You just can't believe it. But you hear these stories of these Tibetan monks who are living up in these mountains, and they have just stone or earth floor, and they have tin walls, and they have these competitions where they put these frozen cold towels around these monks, and they dry them. They have a competition about how many wet towels can you dry off your back through breathing exercises.
Wow.
And I call it the Iron Monk marathon of breathing tests. Like, it's just incredible.
Wow.
Think about, oh, I'm cold, I put sweaters on, or I'm hot, like I'm, and you just think you can't modulate this stuff, but you can. It just takes a lot of time and effort,
I mean, I tested the Wim Hof method. It's very simple, but it's not easy. Simple, but not easy. And, and I would go under really ice cold water during the winter in the shower, and I do the technique. And for whatever reason, I would warm up. And it was fascinating to me. I was like, wow, I can still feel the cold, but I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
And it's really, it's fascinating. It just goes against, and you want to talk about messing with your nervous system, go under some cold water for more than for 2, 3, 4, 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It messes with your entire everything. It's really a fascinating idea. Now, in regards to sleep, what does fatigue do to the brain? Because from my understanding, no one can die from lack of sleep, to my understanding. I mean, please correct me if I'm wrong.
No, there are people, there are definitely cases of death from lack of sleep, because your internal organs and your subsystems all give up. So it's not like, you're not getting, sleep doesn't have a knife, it's stabbing you. It's that without the restorative part of sleep, your heart gives out, your guts start to decay, that your mind starts to give out as well. And
well, that I heard.
yeah. So you definitely can get to a place of actually, and there are people who are, that are genetically unable to sleep, and they die very young. They have some amounts of sleep, enough to get them going, but they die in their 20s because they just, their systems can't keep up with the stress of life.
So, as you were saying earlier, the short sleeper, someone like myself who can sleep 5-6 hours and function, what is the long-term effects of that on someone who's okay with it, as opposed to someone who sleeps 7 or 8 hours or 9 hours of sleep? Is it again per body? So like I can sleep 5 to 6 hours a day and live a very happy life. I'm not asking you to protect my death, but but what does that effect have on the body, or is it really just based on the person?
So this is, you're really asking questions that are right at the forefront of trying to understand when long sleep or short sleep matter. So what we know is that in general, people who sleep fewer hours in their 40s and 50s, you can predict the onset of their dementia and Alzheimer's in their 70s, right? And so that seems to say because there's and the mechanism there is that sleep gives you this deep flushing through of the toxins that build up every day from just being awake and using your brain. You have these little proteins that sort of are left in the brain through these interactions. And if you don't sleep, those proteins can be left in the brain, and they create the tangles and plaques associated with dementia and Alzheimer's. So there's a gradual buildup of them over time. Now, that is not to say that we understand that short sleepers, such as yourself, may have really good, efficient sleep. And, we haven't taken those people out of this equation and seen whether it's actual time asleep, or is it proclivity to be a short sleeper versus a medium sleeper or a long sleeper. And I think that's a really great question, because, when I talk to people, I definitely get that fear look,
Like, am I going to die if I only sleep 6 hours?
Yeah, especially in people who are like 70 already, and then they're saying, but I've been a short sleeper my whole life. Are you telling me, that this is bad? And we just don't know, because we're still at the generalization phase, right, of knowing somebody has Alzheimer's and how they slept when they were younger, right? And, maybe there'll be some years ahead where we'll be able to make some stronger predictions and put people into categories. At this time, all we really know is that, the shorter you sleep, the more your chances are of different kinds of pathological failures later in life. But it may not be for everyone.
Right. And then there's also that other part of the equation: lifestyle, diet, exercise. There's 1,000 other cues to that. Like I sleep only 5 hours, but I eat a perfect diet and I work out all the time, and I meditate, and there's all these other things that can associate with longevity.
Yeah. And that brings up a really important point, which is, I think that as a culture, I'm happy that we're focusing on sleep now, because it's been completely ignored for most of, modern history. At least from the 50s on, people have basically tried to ignore that they need sleep. So now people are really saying, and they're getting anxious about it, and like, how do I get more sleep? But now we're putting too much pressure on sleep, right? And that's really what the book is about, is saying you need to work on your autonomic nervous system. Sleep and circadian rhythm is part of that, and exercise and nutrition, exactly as you said.
So, and there's the other thing too, that I'm a very heavy meditator. So I meditate 1 to 2 hours a day, in addition to being a short sleeper. Now, I know from studying many gurus over the years, and even speaking to some very heavy Tibetan monk meditators, many of them say I can sleep an hour or two, and as long as I meditate for a few hours, I'm good. So they kind of almost get the restorative thing of sleep in the meditation when they go deep into the meditation. What kind of research have you seen in meditation and how it deals in the restorative process?
Yeah. What type of meditation do you practice?
I just do old school, close my eyes and the way I personally, I don't do TM or any of that kind of meditation. I taught myself my own kind of meditation, which is, I was talking to a meditator the other day about, do you remember seeing the movie Castaway with Tom Hanks?
Yeah,
You remember that movie?
I do remember it. Yeah.
So remember that he couldn't get off the island because there were waves. The
Okay.
waves just kept crashing and he had to figure out a way to get past the waves. Well, the waves are the monkey brain. Those are the thoughts. So the goal of a meditator is to get past the waves, because once you get past the waves, then it all goes quiet. So I've taught myself a way to do that myself, where it doesn't work all the time, but it works most of the time, where I can get past the waves of the monkey brain and I go and I'm gone. And sometimes if I go deep enough, I wake up, I mean, better than a night's. After an hour and a half, I can wake up feeling better than I did when I woke up in the morning. So it's super deep meditation where I lose track of time and I go to a place that I really, I don't know where it is, but it's a very peaceful place and it's a very deep place. And that I just truly feel, I walk around with, and it's called it's kind of like the high, you're in bliss. Bliss is the best word I can use for it. So this blissful state, I can get to that place, not all the time, but most of the time I get to that blissful state. And I walk around high for probably about 5 or 10 minutes, just like literally just high off of wherever I came from. And I have to like work my way back out. It's almost a groggy of getting out of a deep sleep. When you feel groggy, same thing with a meditation, but it's different in a different way. So that I think helps with my short sleep. And I haven't always done that. I've only been meditating probably 5 years, I would say, maybe 5, 6 years deeply. But I'd just love to hear your research in regards, if there's any research in regards to the restorative practice of meditation.
Yeah. So people who are super meditators definitely sleep less. They sleep fewer hours, and that is, documented multiple
I
times.
didn't know that.
Yeah, yeah, and the idea is, so most of neuroscience is focused a lot on what's happening from the neck up, and so part of the contribution from my lab is that we are interested in the neck up, but also in the neck down, and really the autonomic nervous system, right, which we've already talked about a little bit, which has these two branches, the revved up fight or flight system, or the restorative rest and digest. So what you find when you go into this meditative state is that you're really shutting down that fight or flight system, and you're going into this super expansive restorative system. And that's exactly what happens when you go to sleep. So when you're in that really deep restorative state, your sympathetic revved up system is completely shut down. And in fact, when you have high levels of sympathetic arousal, this leads to poor sleep, it leads to waking up, and it's correlated with, having a bad day the next day, but also with cardiovascular disease, long-term hypertension, right? Because you need that deeply restorative state for your heart, for your guts, for your metabolism, for your brain, to go into this kind of hibernation state. And what that really is going into this deeply restorative parasympathetic rest and digest system. So when you're meditating, you're actually taking care of the business that would naturally be occurring during sleep.
So it's kind of like, so let's talk about the power of the nap, because the nap is extremely powerful. I was listening to ex-Navy SEAL. His name's Jocko, who's very famous. Goes around. He's like, I sleep 4 hours a day. He goes, but I'll take an hour nap. He goes, I put my feet up above my heart, and he goes, and you take 30 minutes, and he goes, you'll wake up more restored than if you slept 8 hours. He said that like he's amazing, but he's like he's a pretty interesting fellow, to say the least.
Yeah, I just wrote his name down.
He's amazing. But yeah, so what is the power of the nap? And this is why children, newborns sleep so much.
Yeah, absolutely. And why a lot of humans, actually, adult humans, need to nap as well. So it looks like about 50% of the population are nappers, and the other population really are not nappers. And, I came out with my book in December 2006. And by then I had done a bunch of research on napping, showing that you can get the same benefits from a nap that's like an hour to an hour and a half in the middle of the day as you can from a full night of sleep. And we showed this multiple times with multiple different memory tests.
Mhm.
And it was sort of shocking. But then I kept hearing from people saying, but I feel so horrible when I wake up from a nap, and I hate napping. And how do I learn how to nap? I want to get these benefits. So even though I was sure, oh, everybody can nap, they just need to try. Then I did research trying to train, looking at non-nappers versus nappers. And I found out, in fact, non-nappers don't get a lot of benefits from a nap. And when I tried to train non-nappers to nap on a regular basis and then tested them across a month, I still couldn't get them to get any benefits out of the nap. So the nap is wonderful, but it's really not for everyone. And probably in that same way that we have genetic variability in our sleep need at night, we also have the same genetic variability in our sleep need during the day. So some people really need to nap because it's exactly what their body needs. But other people need to go out for a walk in the woods or exercise or meditate, right? That you actually are getting the same benefits to your body and your brain, but you need to do it in the way that works for you.
So I have to ask this question because I remember, and I've had this conversation with friends of mine. I go, you remember when you were a teenager and you could sleep 12 hours, 13 hours, just sleep like a log. I couldn't sleep 12 hours if I tried. It's just something that my body can't do now. Why is it when we're younger, we can have the potential to sleep lots more. And as we get older, we lose that ability because I remember my grandfather would sleep 4 hours, wake up, and he'd wake up, and that's why he had dinner at 4.
Yeah, hungry.
He was hungry. Of course, he's hungry. It's a completely different cycle. So why is that? Why human beings do that?
So when we're younger, we're experiencing a huge amount of growth. And, one of the most important aspects of sleep is that it helps your brain and body grow and learn. So that's really, can help explain why from infants to, 20 years old, we're still really able to tap into that sleep as that growth potential. The reason why we can get really consolidated long periods of sleep when we're that age as well is that we have very strong circadian rhythms that shut us down, that help us be really awake during the day, high arousal. And then when it's time for sleeping, give us very strong cues, strong onsets of melatonin to help us stay asleep throughout the night. As we get older, we start to have weaker circadian rhythm signals. Maybe it's that our eyes aren't getting the right color of light into our brains as well, maybe because we're seeing too many screens, but also just because, the failure of our visual system across age makes it so we're not getting as much blue light to really wake us up and to really keep us, asleep. But we also just produce less melatonin. And that means that we don't get these long periods of sleep. We have many more circadian arousals while we should be having circadian rest. So that's, one of the things that's really important as you get older is to, become aware of how your age is impacting your ability to get downstate sleep, and just to get downstate anything whenever you want it. So you need to really cue yourself in the morning. This is morning. I'm starting the upstate. I want my arousal to be high. Get the right light in your eyes. That means sun or a bright light box. A great way to jumpstart your upstate is through exercise in the morning, getting yourself, jazzed up through revving up your sympathetic arousal system. Eating is a great way to entrain the circadian rhythm. So eating creates a stress response in your body. So eating during the day when you want the upstate to be up is is really a great cue, and then stopping eating at a certain period of time to tell your metabolism that you're going to go into the downstate. So a lot of the reason why, we're being told to have this time restricted eating and really, fast for long periods every day and every night is because your metabolic system needs a downstate as well. And that allows it to regenerate and be as strong as it needs to be for that upstate intake of energy.
So the magic question is, when should we stop eating?
It depends on what is feasible, I think, for people. I think it's so important to think about, are you somebody who really has a structure that you can just, keep the same structure every day? And for that, I would recommend time restricted eating, where you just, you start in the morning and then you stop at, say, 7, 8, 6 p.m., like whatever you can in that domain, and then just give yourself a nice big fat downstate every night. But then there's people who travel and who need to, go out for work dinners, and who need to, do all sorts of things that make it that kind of a schedule is actually really hard to maintain. So for that, I think it's great to just take a day every few days or once a week, and eat a very small amount, because you're also in that same vein, giving yourself a nice big downstate for your metabolic system for a whole day.
So how many hours, give or take, before sleep should we have nothing in our system?
I mean, it's recommended to have about 3 or 4.
Oof, that's rough. That's rough.
I mean, really, if you think about it, here's what's going to, I think an important thing to think about. So insulin, right, that is generated, starts generating early in the morning. This is the nutrient that helps change your food into usable energy, right? And it shuttles the nutrients into the cells. So that's really important, because then if insulin is high, then your metabolism is super efficient and you're using all the food and you're turning it into energy and sending it right into the cells. So as you go across your day, insulin starts to decay, and your ability to make insulin gets worse and worse and worse. So by the end of the day, when you're eating, not a lot of that food is actually being shuttled into the cells. It's just being stored as fat. So your whole metabolic system is going into a downstate. But if you keep eating, your food is not going to be used efficiently. It's going to be stored as fat if you eat at night. And usually when we eat at night, our frontal lobe is shut down, right? We're not making our best decisions. Mm-hmm. So that we eat, high sugar, high fat foods as well.
So the midnight snack is not something we should be doing.
For several reasons.
For several reasons. Now, what does lack of sleep or fatigue do to the brain, actually, the chemistry of the brain and how it functions?
So lack of sleep basically does all the, it basically keeps the things that sleep does at bay. So sleep is helping you with consolidating your memories. It's helping you with emotional regulation. It's helping you clean out the toxins in your brain. It's helping you repair muscle tissue. It's helping you create new proteins in your body, in your brain, back up your glycogen stores. All those things are really important, and give your heart a break, right? It brings your heart rate down really significantly. So when you have chronic levels of sleep deprivation and you're chronically sleep deprived, you're in a chronically stressed state. Basically, chronic sleep deprivation is the same as chronic stress. And what does that lead to? Well, it leads to hypertension and heart disease. It leads to obesity, diabetes. It leads to all the main players, poor gut health. Later it can lead to cognitive dysfunction. So, it's definitely something that we want to, focus on, but also not make ourselves anxious about.
Stressing about stressing.
Yeah, exactly.
We are such interesting creatures, aren't we?
It's a delicate balance there.
Now, I heard you talk about the vagus. Is it the vagus nerve?
Mhm.
What is that?
Okay, great. So the vagus nerve is basically the cranial nerve that comes from the body, and it's attached to all your major physical organs, and it sends information to your brain. So it's basically the freeway for all of your body information to be sent up to the brain.
Is it like the brain stem, if you will? Is it in there or
The
different?
brainstem is a part of the brain where the vagus nerve connects to
Okay.
the rest of your brain. Yeah. And so
Okay.
what's important about that is it's telling you a lot of information about how stressed you are, how your guts, when you're getting nervous about something and your guts start to roil, you got to run to the bathroom if you're really, really nervous, right? Or if you see somebody, you get butterflies. That's the vagus nerve connecting your body to your brain, right? And telling your guts like, oh, I'm excited or I'm scared. So there's a strong connection there between your guts and your brain through the vagus nerve. But it's also a strong connection from your heart to your brain. So when you get excited, your heart starts to race. That's because of the vagus nerve. So the vagus nerve is is basically representing or reflecting your parasympathetic rest and digest system. So when the vagus nerve is turned off, that's when you get super excited, right? And you're kind of, really, sending a lot of excitatory information. When you start to engage deep breathing and calm down and you're able to self-regulate, that's the vagus nerve turning on and saying, okay, let me, take a break and deep breathe and, make sure I've got a hold of myself.
So this is a neuroscience geeky question. So please bear with me. It's a little slightly off topic, but might be not off topic depending on your answer. I was told that there's kind of a barrier between the brain and the rest of the body, which does not allow toxins to get through that barrier. Very few things can get through it. Heroin can get through it. Cocaine can get through it. I was told certain mushrooms for health benefits can get through it. Is that a true statement?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so there's lots of, medications are really important in that ways. Can they cross this thing called the blood-brain barrier?
Right.
Some medications, if you think about antihistamines, that's a perfect example of when people have allergies. Some of the medications make them drowsy, right? But the Claritins are ones that and the reason why they make them drowsy is because they cross the blood-brain barrier and they get into the brain. So what they're trying to do is calm down your histamine reactions in your body, but they're also making you drowsy, right? But the Claritin versions don't cross the blood-brain barrier, so it just affects your body, but it doesn't affect your brain.
So that's why, if not, I mean, every time you eat McDonald's or some bad food or something like that, maybe some chemicals or toxins could affect the brain, and that blood-brain barrier is there to protect the brain from toxins or poisons or anything like that might get into our system, correct?
Exactly. And one of the ways that things like that can get into your brain is through your guts, is through the vagus nerve, because that's that gut-brain connection. If you have any sort of, poisonous or bacteria that's in the guts and you have leaky guts, this is a problem of leaky gut syndrome. That means that those bacteria can travel up the vagus nerve and into your brain. And there's associations between mental illness and poor gut function due to this highway.
So it's kind of a back door, if you will.
Yeah.
It's like a back door into the brain, because I've had multiple guests on talking about the gut. I've been preaching about the gut for a while now, having a good microbiome and how it helps your body and helps your brain function, helps everything, immune system, the whole thing. I've become fairly obsessed with the microbiome, which is a good thing. I've just been trying to take care of it, but that's something that a lot of people just don't understand, that gut is very beneficial. It actually is everything.
Yeah, I talk about it a lot in my book. And I actually, I sort of, the fact is that it's its own entity. It's like a huge apartment complex filled with a lot of different bacteria, and they all live and they're completely separate from you. And the question is it like, in the hood and like a really, mix of sort of good and bad, or is it, more on the bad side, or is it, we're getting into some sort of, good, neighborhood where it's like everybody's taking care of, everyone cares about, taking care of the neighborhood, right? So that's, you want
Has
to
an HOA, has an HOA is what you say. Has an HOA.
Yeah,
There's no dinosaurs on the lawns.
Right, we are taking care. No cars on the lawn.
No cars on the
Exactly.
lawn.
Right. We are taking care of our neighborhood, and it's not necessarily you, right? Because these are independent bacteria that are helping you digest your foods, right? There's many foods that our bodies don't actually naturally digest, but the guts do digest. So you want to keep those guys happy, and then you want to try to keep them from letting the bad guys in.
Right. And that's why there's things like prebiotics and postbiotics and probiotics and all that kind of stuff to help you with that.
Fiber. Like, I mean,
just straight up spinach salad.
Eating well. Yeah. Like there's a lot of, you have to eat a lot of those probiotics and supplements in order to actually have an effect. And you have to do it regularly and be really religious about it. Yeah. So I think also just eat well. Don't eat at McDonald's, keep all those good foods in your diet every day.
I was talking to a doctor the other day about it, and he said this, like, I mean, use supplements, like, yeah, if you want to use a couple here and there if you want, but just eat a salad, man. And you're going to get a much wider variety of probiotics and food for the bacteria, which is really interesting. It's kind of really an interesting idea, the microbiome, which is not, I feel that it's a lot of people are talking about it now, where before they really weren't. 5 years ago, I didn't hear a word about microbiomes or the importance of them.
I mean, there is always the poop transplant, which you can't.
Oh, there's that. I heard about that too. Yeah. And there's been some really amazing science behind that. There, people are like deathly ill, and they literally jam poop back up into the healthy poop with a really good bacteria.
There's a paper that talks about repopulating the gut, and it's a scientific article that has that, and it's just so, it's such an amazing idea that it's not just for gut health, but this is going to be a treatment for mental health as well, for depression, anxiety, and potentially also schizophrenia. That this connection is actually really important.
I love that scientists are becoming stand-up comics with the poop, repopulating or whatever.
Yeah, I know a lot of poop jokes in my book.
No, but this is all connected, because at the end of the day, we're trying to think about the brain and think about just our body as a machine, and in the downstate and sleeping and restorative processes is part of this really giant ecosystem of what we run. I mean, this machine is fairly amazing. The design of us is quite remarkable. I have to say that as I get older, I realize that, by the way.
Right. And it's a huge point to think about. Like I've been writing on Medium, and I have this essay called I'm Anti-Biohacking. And it's really saying the idea that you can biohack, right? Like hack, any kind of word hack shouldn't be part of your body. Like, right. Hacking is that you can try to trick a system, that you can do a short, quick and dirty approach to health. You don't need to. The system has been going for millions of years, right? Of billions of years in terms of just general, circadian rhythm development across bacteria. So we can actually just rest in this idea of this whole nature system has been doing this a lot longer than us. And if we get into this biorhythm idea of fitting in our activities when we're optimized to be active, and fitting in our downstate activities when we're optimized for rest, you'll see so much benefits later on, and day to day, but also later on, right? That all that chronic disease and chronic problems that we're seeing, those will go away if we tap into these biorhythms.
So, and you've said circadian, I can't say the word.
Circadian
rhythms a couple times in this conversation. Can you explain to the audience what that exactly is?
Yeah. So the circadian rhythm are basically like every cell in your body has a little clock in it, and it tells that cell has an upstate and a downstate. It's basically just a rhythm. Circadian rhythm specifically is the 24-hour rhythm, and it's guided by light mostly, and it's guided by the sun. The fact that we've had the sun and that the earth spins on an axis gives us half a day of light and half a day of darkness, right?
Unless you're in Alaska.
Yes. Well, though that's very interesting because
Yeah.
people who have been genetically for many, many years and animals that have stayed up in those winter areas, they have a different circadian rhythm. And they're
Mm.
able to um, actually ignore the light signals and keep their internal circadian rhythms despite the light not changing
Mm.
or despite the light being all dark or all light. But they still have circadian rhythms. They're what's called endogenously driven, meaning that their body tells them what's going on. And you get it from, you can also drive your circadian rhythm by, first is light. That's the biggest time giver. Basically, it's called Zeitgeber, but also eating. That's why, time restricted eating is so popular, is because it's really setting up your circadian rhythm. Now is the beginning of my day. Now is the beginning of the upstate. I'm eating. Now I'm stopping eating. Now is the beginning of my downstate, right? Exercise, massive for timing the upstates and the downstates. Any kind of habits that you keep that actually will tell you what time it is. Why does your stomach grumble, say 20 minutes or so, 15 minutes or so before you regularly eat lunch? It's not that there's a, golden hour for eating lunch that all of our stomachs growl. It's just that that's usually when we get lunch, right? So then our systems have learned by habit to create a rhythm around that eating period. And it's getting your body ready for intake of sugars and fats and proteins. And so you really are sort of pre-gaming.
So then if we do eventually populate Mars or another planet with a different circadian rhythm, I don't know what the day is, the Martian day is. I don't think it's a 24-hour day.
No,
but our bodies the astronauts or whoever are there would eventually create their own rhythm based around where they are. That's the genius of our system. Is that fair?
Yeah. Yes, it takes a long time to adapt. So I think that it won't be like a quick, easy thing. But basically, yes, that's the idea, is that over time, either through artificial light sources or through just the natural light of Mars, that your system would adapt to that rhythm.
So let's say that you're having problems getting to bed. What are a few not hacks, because that's a bad word, but tips tips that we can do to get ourselves properly in our sleep? Because I know, like, I have a bad habit. I watch television all the way up until I go to sleep, and I just turn the TV off and I go to bed. I know that's not ideal. So what is an ideal routine before you go to bed? And then what are hacks to make us fall asleep if we can't?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really interested in how we, not just, the hour before we go to sleep, but what about like the whole 12 hours of the day, 15 hours that we've been awake? What are we doing there? So I'd start there and make sure that a lot of the morning time is when you do your intense cardiovascular exercises, is when you do the majority of your eating. Like, say, before 3 o'clock, you should have at least 50%, if not more, of your calorie intake. So pushing the more intensive or stressful experiences to earlier in the day, and then engaging in slow, deep breathing, right? Like, the issue is that if you just continue to raise your stress levels across the day without taking dips into the downstate, right, that just kind of level you off, you get to the state of actually pretty high stress by the time you're heading to bed.
And it's hard to sleep.
It's hard to sleep. It puts a lot of pressure on your brain to try to turn off when your mind is running, when you've gotten, so much activation throughout the whole day. So taking, a lot of time, not a lot, but let's just say 10 minutes across the day. I know you do a lot
couple
more.
Hours. Yeah. But I'm understanding now, just by you talking, how important these little meditative states that I do are in my life. I had no idea.
They're massive. Yeah, because they keep you at a much more regulated, self-regulated level, so that by the time, even if you're going to watch a movie before bed, you're not entering that state already so amped up and then watching a movie that's also scary or whatever, that's sending a lot of blue light into your eyes. Like, or, God forbid, right? It's the social media time, right? It's finally
No.
right? And then you get on the news and then you start reading about like the environment and like the drought in China that I just was like exposed to in the middle of the night last night. Like, okay, I'm not going to sleep. Like,
Right. Right.
like there's a lot of scary stuff happening right now. And so if you expose yourself to that when you're already trying to get to bed, that's not, so as much as you could do to put yourself in that deeply relaxed state and keep yourself, dipping into it throughout the day, but then at night, keep the blue light down, right? Do I have them here? Yeah.
The blue
There's
blockers, yeah.
blue light blockers that are really, really cool and you make you look super.
They're very slick, I have to say.
But don't wear them during the day because that would be the wrong signal to your brain. So I really like these blue light blockers. I wear them at night now.
So what you watch do you watch television with them on, or?
Oh, I'll watch television. I will read my book, everything that I do, I'll keep those glasses on. Anytime after, say, 7 o'clock, I'll start wearing them.
Interesting.
And
So
it's actually super relaxing. I find that when I put them on, I'm suddenly, because there's a lot of stress that you get from the information coming into your
especially if you're
light source.
on monitors all day.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So I just as you were talking, I was remembering a day that I went to eat all you can eat sushi at 11 o'clock at night. Let's say I wasn't a good night's sleep at all.
Right.
Because
you were young.
I wasn't that young. I was in my early 40s, and I was stupid. I was just straight up stupid. So among other problems that all you could eat sushi at 10 or 11 does,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it was a very difficult sleep. And then you're digesting, and it was just so much food because you got to get your money's worth.
Exactly.
So it was a really difficult night to deal with. And then I remember sometimes we watch, let's say we watch a thriller, a war thriller, or an espionage show like a James Bond, or just something violent, super violent before you go to bed. Like I remember we watched a show, we didn't know it was going to go in that direction, and it went in that direction. And then my wife is like, I can't get to sleep. And the next morning she's like, I just was dreaming about assassinations and this or that.
Exactly.
It's so we're really cautious now of what we watch right before bed.
Yeah.
Weekends are different, but like on the weekdays, nothing too super heavy, or if not, at least an hour.
The cost, right? Like you think about like, how am I going to be the next day? I've got all this stuff to do. I've got kids. I got to be up in the morning and like get them to school, and I've got to be in a good mood. And then I've got to have them when they get home and like have energy for them. Like it's not worth it, but the problem is that in those moments at 11 o'clock, right, is when our frontal cortex is shut off. So it's actually quite difficult to make that decision to turn off Netflix, or to say no to that scoop of ice cream, or to not respond to some horrible rant from, an uncle that you just can't stand. So that's really the problem and so I think it's really important when you think about like, how do I deal with that, is setting up habits. And in the book, actually, I have a plan it's called the Downstate Recovery Plus plan. And what it basically just gives you a system for how you can add one habit a week. And so you have your Downstate plan running on all 4 cylinders, right? Where you have things that keep you at a habit level. So when the time comes, you don't have to make that decision anymore. You already have this is what I do. I stop eating at this time, or I stop watching TV at this time, or, I'm getting my exercise in at this hour, or whatever it is that, there's a long list of all the different options.
Yeah. And obviously when you start exercising, you sleep deeper. I found, especially when you start
depending on what time you exercise, though.
Right. So some people are late exercisers. They'll do it like after work. I'm an early morning, 5 o'clock in the morning kind of exerciser, and I do all my heavy stuff there. Though I do sometimes do a double, and I'll go to the gym around 4, but still plenty of time prior.
Yeah, 4 is all right. I mean, I think I do get worried about people who are stretching it into like
7, 8, 9.
Yeah.
That's
really, I mean, you can do weightlifting a little bit, but if you're really running your cardiovascular system, it's going to increase your body temperature. It's going to increase your heart rate, and that stuff takes a long time to calm down. So people who I know who are nighttime exercisers, they often don't sleep very well.
Right, exactly, because of that. But I found it that early morning routine of just waking up, going, working out, it just gets the ball rolling for the
Absolutely.
day. It just starts the engine running, starts everything going. You eat early. It just sets everything up properly. I feel so much, and I've slept. Both my wife and I have been doing a lot more working out lately, and we start to feel. We start going to bed at like, oh, it's 9:30. Should we go to bed? It's way too early. I'm like, let's go to bed.
Yeah,
Because
you have that thought of like, I feel lame.
I feel I'm like, am I a loser? Did we just go to bed at the same time
Am I this
our
old?
our
I
our
know.
our little girls went to bed?
I know.
But we're exhausted, and because of our bodies working out, especially when you're starting a routine that you're not used to, but you sleep so much better, and exercise just burns out so many different things in your body, in your mind. It relieves stress. It does so much good for you. Even
Yeah.
minor exercise.
Yeah, it
That's
increases mood. I mean, it really is an elixir.
It is without question. And now, where can people find out more about you, your book, and the work that you're doing?
I have a website. My name's saramednick.com. And my
Mhm.
book is available anywhere. I mean, Amazon, obviously, bookshop, any website, but also bookstores. Ask for it at bookstores if you don't find it. It's always great for authors to have their books requested.
Mhm.
And then my contact information is on my website, and I give talks and all sorts of and workshops, and always happy to talk to people about their ideas for different events.
Sarah, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for enlightening us on the power of sleep and naps and the downstate and everything we've talked about. I've learned a lot about this, and hopefully everybody listening has as well. So I appreciate you and the work that you've been doing to help people. So thank you so much.
It's my pleasure, Alex. Thanks so much for having me on.
Thanks for watching. Click on one of the videos below to continue your journey, and don't forget to subscribe.